The Lady's Stubborn Heart. Chapter 1. A Third Season and a Stolen Moment. Lady Evelina Wycliffe had reached the sort of age that made other people anxious on her behalf. At 23, and in her third London season, she had become a familiar figure in drawing rooms and at assemblies, never foolish, never forward, always composed. And yet the same question fluttered behind fans and over teacups whenever she entered. How is it that Lord Ainsworth's daughter is still unengaged? Evelina knew precisely how it had happened. She had refused 2 offers in her first season, one from a viscount with a kindly smile and a mind that never wandered beyond horseflesh, another from a gentleman with excellent estates and an affection that was far too pleased with her family's name. In her second season, she had refused fewer men, only because fewer asked. Her refusal had gained a reputation, and men, like sparrows, avoided a window that had once snapped shut on their wings. It was not that Evelina disdained marriage. She believed in it, believed in home, partnership, tenderness that could endure the dull days as well as the glittering ones. But she had watched too many unions that were respectable on paper and miserable in practice, couples who spoke only through their stewards, husbands who treated wives as furniture, wives who learned to smile while their hearts dried quietly behind the ribs. "Love," she had said, the first time her mother tried to persuade her to accept a very eligible baronet, "or I shall not marry at all." The statement should have caused a storm. Instead, it had caused a silence, heavy, searching, and then her father, the Earl of Ainsworth, had simply looked at her as though he could see the bones of her character as plainly as the shape of her face. "Then love," he had said, with a slow nod, "or nothing. I will not sell my daughter for a title that already hangs over her head." Lady Ainsworth had sighed, pressed 2 fingers to her temple as though warding off a headache, and said, "Very well, but do remember, darling, that love is not always dramatic. Sometimes it arrives quietly." Evelina had promised to remember. She did not believe she truly understood until the morning she met Lord Brackenridge. It happened not in a ballroom beneath chandeliers, but in the less ceremonial light of a spring afternoon. She had been riding in Hyde Park with her younger brother Henry, an earnest young man of 19 who considered it his responsibility to keep Evelina amused and safe, though Evelina suspected he enjoyed the role more than he admitted. Their groom followed at a distance, as did a footman on another mount, and the park was crowded with the usual parade of elegance, polished boots, bright curricles, parasols like flower petals. Evelina was not in the mood for parade. She had attended a musicale the night before, where she had been seated beside Mr. Fenwick, a gentleman who spoke with such conviction about his own taste that he left no room for anyone else's. He had informed her, with the air of a man providing charity, that he sought a wife of refined sensibility who would not trouble herself with opinions. He had then laughed as though it were a charming jest. Evelina had smiled politely and thought, "I would rather wed a storm." Today she wanted air, distance, the honest rhythm of her mare's hooves. She rode a little apart from the throng, under a line of budding trees, until Henry began to lag behind, waving at a friend. "Go," Evelina told him. "I shall not vanish into the Serpentine." "See that you do not," Henry said solemnly, then galloped off with the enthusiasm of youth. Evelina slowed, turning her mare toward a quieter path, where fewer eyes followed and fewer mouths performed their little calculations. She was enjoying the rare sensation of being alone when a commotion ahead broke the calm. Shouts, a sudden scattering of pigeons, the sharp cry of a woman. Evelina urged her mare forward. A curricle had struck a rut and lurched. One of the horses reared, tossing its head wildly. The gentleman holding the reins struggled to steady the team, but he was too flustered and too proud to call for help quickly enough. The curricle's wheel caught again and threatened to tip. A lady in pale yellow, who had been walking along the path, froze in terror as the horse's hooves churned and the carriage skidded dangerously toward her. Evelina did not think. She acted. She turned her mare and rode straight toward the chaos, calling out, "Hold him! Pull his head around! Hard left!" The gentleman looked at her as though offended by instruction. Then the horse lunged again, and offence became irrelevant. Another rider reached them from the opposite direction, a tall man on a dark bay, moving with controlled speed. He did not shout. He did not panic. He simply rode close enough to seize the bridle of the rearing horse with his gloved hand and speak low, steady words that Evelina could not hear. The horse's eyes rolled white. It fought. The rider held. Even at a distance, Evelina could see that he was in pain. Not the transitory pain of strained muscles, but something deeper, something that lived in the body and had made a home there. His posture was rigid with effort, the lines of his jaw drawn tight. When he shifted in the saddle, there was the faintest hitch, as though one movement cost him more than it ought. Still, he did not let go. Evelina brought her mare alongside the curricle, leaning down to the frightened lady. "Madam, step back quickly. You are safe. Step behind my horse." The lady stumbled away, nearly fainting. Evelina steadied her with a firm hand and guided her behind her mare's flank. Then she turned her attention to the gentleman at the reins. "Give him his head, sir, slightly," she instructed, "and turn the wheel out of the rut. If you fight him, he will fight you." The gentleman's face reddened, but he obeyed. The rider at the bridle, whoever he was, made a small adjustment, pulling the horse's head to the side, breaking the animal's line of sight. The horse snorted, threw its head once more, then, miracle of miracles, settled, trembling but standing. The crisis ended as swiftly as it had begun. The gentleman in the curricle began to stammer apologies to the lady in yellow, then turned, rather as if remembering that he was expected to perform gratitude. Thank you, both of you," he said, then focused on the other rider. "Sir, what is your name?" The man who had seized the bridle released it slowly, flexing his fingers once as though feeling the ache settle into his joints. His gaze flicked toward Evelina, brief, assessing, and unreadable. "Brackenridge," he said, voice low. "Lord Brackenridge." The name landed. Evelina had heard it before, though not often spoken with ease. Brackenridge was an old barony, ancient, respectable. But there had been whispers in the last year that the Baron had gone to war, that he had been injured, that his estates were troubled. Some said he had returned colder than before, some said he had returned haunted. Society loved nothing so much as a tragedy with a title. Evelina had expected, if she ever met Lord Brackenridge, that it would be at some grand event, under a chandelier, with a dozen introductions and the careful observation of half the room. Instead, he stood on a muddy park path, his gloved hand smudged with dirt from the bridle, his expression set as if a smile were an indulgence he could not afford. The lady in yellow recovered enough to curtsy shakily. "My lord, you have saved me from— Oh, I cannot even think." "It was nothing," Lord Brackenridge said, already turning his horse as though the matter were finished. The dismissal was so abrupt that Evelina's temper pricked, small and sharp, like a pin. "It was not nothing," she said before she could stop herself. "It was a great deal, my lord, and it cost you, I believe." His gaze returned to her, slightly narrowed. "Did it?" Evelina lifted her chin. "You moved as though you were injured." For a moment, his expression became very still. Then he said, in a tone too even, "We are all injured in one way or another, Lady—" "Lady Evelina Wycliffe," she replied, though she had not been properly introduced. "Daughter of the Earl of Ainsworth." Something flickered, recognition, perhaps, or calculation. He inclined his head a fraction. Lady Evelina. The air between them tightened, not unpleasantly, but with a curious tension, as though something had been set in motion without either of them meaning to touch it. Evelina's heart beat once, hard. And then, as if the beat embarrassed her, she straightened her reins and said, "Thank you, my lord." He did not answer with any flourish. "See that you keep to safer paths," he said instead. "Some gentlemen cannot manage their own horses." It was, if one were generous, almost a jest. Evelina surprised herself by smiling. Some horses cannot manage their own gentlemen. For the first time, a faint, unwilling curve tugged at the corner of his mouth, as though amusement had tried to surface and been told it was not permitted. Then he rode away. Evelina watched him go, her mare shifting restlessly beneath her. She told herself it was only the excitement of the moment, the relief of danger avoided, the satisfaction of having been useful. And yet her gaze remained fixed on the dark line of his back until the trees swallowed him. Henry returned a moment later, full of questions, and Evelina answered them with a composure she did not entirely feel. That evening, at dinner, her mother mentioned that Lady Hartwell was hosting a small supper the following week. "Lord Brackenridge is expected," Lady Ainsworth added casually, watching Evelina over her wine-glass. Evelina nearly choked on her water. "Is he?" she managed. Her father's eyebrows rose. "You sound surprised." Evelina said carefully, "I had not thought he attended such things." "Nor did anyone," Lady Ainsworth said. "Which makes it interesting." Evelina kept her expression neutral. "Perhaps he wishes only to be polite." Lady Ainsworth's lips curved. "Or perhaps, my dear, he is being pulled back into life, whether he wishes it or not." Evelina did not reply, but that night, when she lay awake in her bedchamber, with the curtains stirring faintly in the breeze, she saw again the way Lord Brackenridge had held the horse's bridle, steady against fear and chaos, even as pain pulled at him, and she wondered what sort of man could be both wounded and unyielding. Chapter 2. The Baron's Pride and the First Intrigue. Lady Hartwell's supper was, by design, not the sort of gathering where one could hide in a crowd. There were only 12 guests, chosen carefully for compatibility and interest. Lady Hartwell had a talent for creating an atmosphere in which conversation flowed as naturally as wine. Evelina had attended many such evenings, and had always enjoyed them. This time, she found herself aware of the door. When Lord Brackenridge finally arrived, he did not enter like a man seeking attention. He entered like a man fulfilling an obligation. His clothing was immaculate: dark coat, crisp linen, nothing fashionable enough to invite comment. But there was a restraint in him that drew the eye more than any flourish. He greeted Lady Hartwell with a measured courtesy, then turned as she guided him toward the room. His gaze found Evelina almost immediately. It was not a hungry gaze. It was not even particularly warm. It was simply direct, as though he had already formed an opinion of her and was curious whether she would prove it wrong. Lady Hartwell smiled. "Lady Evelina Wycliffe, you know Lord Brackenridge, I believe." "Only briefly," Evelina said, rising and curtsying. "Hyde Park made us acquainted." Lord Brackenridge bowed, and his voice was softer than she remembered. "Lady Evelina." They were seated at the table with deliberate strategy. Lady Hartwell placed Evelina beside Lord Brackenridge as naturally as one might place the salt. Evelina told herself it meant nothing. Lady Hartwell liked conversation. Lord Brackenridge was newly returned. He would require someone who could speak without flattery and without fear. Still, when he sat, he did so with a careful economy of motion that confirmed Evelina's suspicion. His injury was real, and he masked it with the same discipline with which he masked everything else. Dinner began. Conversation moved from books to politics, from theatre to gossip. Lord Brackenridge spoke rarely, but when he did, the room listened. He had the air of a man who had seen things that made trivial remarks feel like waste. Evelina did not want to waste his attention. "So," she said quietly, while another guest told a story too long by half, "how does one return from war?" and tolerate London. His eyes shifted to her. One does not tolerate it. One endures it, like weather. Evelina's mouth twitched. Then you dislike it. I dislike noise that pretends to be meaning. And yet you are here. His gaze sharpened. Lady Hartwell is persuasive. Evelina glanced toward the hostess, who was laughing at something Henry said. She is. Lord Brackenridge's fingers tightened slightly on his wine glass. And you? Do you endure London, or do you enjoy it? Evelina considered. I enjoy people. I endure. Expectations. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes warmed fractionally. Expectations are the most reliable chain. Evelina looked down at her plate, troubled by how easily he spoke of chains, as though he knew their weight intimately. When the ladies withdrew after dinner, Evelina found herself in the drawing room with Lady Hartwell and a few others. Music was offered, but Evelina declined. She was not in the mood to perform prettiness. Instead, she drifted toward the window, where the night outside looked cool and still. She did not notice Lord Brackenridge enter until his voice came from behind her. Lady Evelina. She turned. He stood a little apart from the others, as though the crowd did not quite accept him and he did not quite accept it. My lord. You spoke earlier of expectations, he said. Evelina's pulse stirred. I did. He glanced toward the room, where laughter rose and fell. Do you truly mean to marry only for love? The question was abrupt enough to make her cheeks heat. Is that a matter of public discussion? His mouth tightened. It is a matter of public curiosity. Evelina lifted her chin. Then allow me to disappoint the curious. Yes, I mean it. He studied her, as if testing whether she would flinch. Love is unreliable. So are men, Evelina returned before she could temper it. For the first time, his eyes flashed. Something like genuine amusement. Indeed. Then his expression sobered again. Unreliable love makes unreliable marriages. Evelina's gaze held his. And marriages without love make unreliable souls. Something in his face went very still, as though she had struck nearer truth than either of them had intended. He looked away first. I should not have asked, he said curtly. Evelina's pride rose, matching his. Then why did you? He turned back, and for a moment she saw something raw beneath the control. Weariness, perhaps, or fear. Because, he said, voice low, people who speak of love as if it is worth the risk either have never been wounded or have decided wounds are acceptable. Evelina felt the weight of his words settle into her chest. Before she could answer, Lady Hartwell called for attention. Someone had arrived late, and introductions swept the room into motion. Lord Brackenridge stepped back as though his moment of vulnerability had been an error, already corrected. Good evening, Lady Evelina. He moved away. Evelina stood at the window a moment longer, watching her own reflection float faintly in the glass, and tried to steady herself. She told herself again, it is nothing. A man with scars spoke too plainly. That is all. But in the weeks that followed, she began to see Lord Brackenridge more often. Not by design, at least not by her design. He appeared at dinners, at charitable committees, at lectures. Always quiet, always controlled, and always, somehow, their paths crossed. At first, Evelina thought it merely Lady Hartwell's influence. Then she began to notice other things. Men watching Lord Brackenridge with an odd attentiveness, women whispering when he passed, a certain gentleman, Mr. Ashdown, a smooth-faced fellow with two bright eyes, who always seemed to be near when Lord Brackenridge was. One afternoon after a charity meeting in Mayfair, Evelina stepped into the hall to find her shawl. Voices drifted from the adjoining room, men's voices, low and tense. "Cannot continue," someone said. "The debt is—" "I will not sell Brackenridge," came Lord Brackenridge's voice, clipped. "Not to satisfy vultures." A softer voice. "Then you must marry, my lord." Silence. Then Lord Brackenridge said very quietly, "I will not take a wife as a remedy." Evelina's breath caught. She should have moved away. Instead, she stood frozen, listening, cheeks hot with the shame of overhearing. Mr. Ashdown's voice slid into the silence like oil. A wife could be useful, especially one with a dowry. Ainsworth's daughter. Evelina's spine stiffened. Lord Brackenridge's voice turned cold. "Do not speak of her as though she is coin." Ashdown gave a low laugh. "Coin is what keeps roofs standing. Pride does not." Evelina backed away before the conversation could continue, heart pounding. She returned to the drawing room with her expression composed, but something had shifted inside her. Encumbered estates, debt, a wife as remedy. It explained the rumours, and it explained, perhaps, Lord Brackenridge's restraint. Not merely wounded pride, but the burden of responsibility, the fear of being forced into a marriage of convenience, the refusal to become a man who bartered vows. And the fact that he had defended her, do not speak of her as coin, settled into her like a spark. That evening, she told her mother she wished to visit Brackenridge House. Lady Ainsworth blinked. "Visit Brackenridge House?" "Yes," Evelina said steadily. "Lady Brackenridge is dead, of course, but Lord Brackenridge's aunt, Lady Meryton, keeps house for him. I met her once. She invited me, and I have delayed too long." It was not entirely a lie. Lady Meryton had indeed spoken warmly to her at Lady Hartwell's supper, though she had not issued a formal invitation. Lady Ainsworth studied Evelina carefully. "You are interested in him." Evelina did not deny it. "I am interested in the truth about him." Her mother's eyes softened. That is always how it begins. Her father, when told, did not object. He only said, "Be certain you are not chasing a man who wishes to remain unreachable." Evelina said, "If he wishes that, he will tell me." And in her heart, she added, "But I do not believe he wishes it. I believe he thinks he must." 2 days later, Evelina arrived at Brackenridge House. It was not as grand as Ainsworth House, though it had the bones of old nobility. Stone worn smooth by time, windows tall and dignified, gardens that had once been carefully tended and now looked slightly tired, as though the estate itself carried worry. Lady Meryton greeted Evelina warmly, her eyes sharp beneath her kindness. "Lady Evelina, how good of you to come. My nephew will be—" "My aunt," Lord Brackenridge's voice cut in from the doorway. He entered with a slight stiffness, as if the short walk cost him. His expression was polite and guarded. "Lady Evelina," he said, inclining his head. Evelina curtsied. "My lord, I hope I am not an inconvenience." His gaze held hers. Inconvenience is a matter of perspective. Lady Meryton huffed. "Do not frighten her off with your riddles. Come, tea will be served." They sat in a sunny parlour, where the furniture was elegant but worn, and a ledger lay open on a side table, an unusual sight in a room meant for guests. Evelina noticed it, and understood more than she wished to. Lord Brackenridge's life was not presently shaped by pleasure. During tea, Lady Meryton spoke of trivial matters, flowers, visiting friends, the absurdities of London. Lord Brackenridge said little. Evelina waited until Lady Meryton was distracted by the entrance of a footman with fresh cakes. Then she said quietly, "Are you well, my lord?" His eyes flicked to her. "As well as one may be." Evelina's voice softened. "I heard by accident, that your estates are troubled." The air went taut. Lady Meryton, sensing the shift, turned her head sharply. "Evelina." But Lord Brackenridge lifted a hand, halting his aunt's protest. His gaze remained on Evelina, hard and searching. "You should not have heard anything," he said. "I did not mean to pry," Evelina replied. "But I cannot pretend ignorance when I care." The last words escaped before she could catch them. His face went very still. Evelina's heart hammered, but she did not look away. "I do care," she repeated, steady now. "And I have begun to believe you rebuff not because you do not feel, but because you are proud enough to fear being pitied." His jaw tightened. "You know nothing of what I fear." "Then tell me," Evelina said, "or do not. But do not stand between yourself and happiness because you think you do not deserve it." For a moment, silence held them. Then Lord Brackenridge rose abruptly. "Lady Evelina," he said, voice clipped, "you mistake boldness for understanding." Evelina stood as well, refusing to shrink. "And you mistake pride for honor." His eyes flashed. "Do not romanticize ruin." Evelina's hands curled into fists beneath her gloves. "I do not romanticize it. I merely refuse to believe that a man must be whole and wealthy before he is worthy of love." Lord Brackenridge's breath came sharper. Then, with an expression like a door slamming shut, he said, "You should go." Lady Meryton looked stricken. "Nephew." "I said you should go," he repeated, not to his aunt, but to Evelina. Evelina's throat tightened. Humiliation rose hot and sudden. Humiliation and something deeper, like grief. She forced herself to curtsy. "As you wish, my lord." She left Brackenridge House with her head high, her cheeks burning, and her heart aching as though she had been the one wounded in battle. Chapter 3. The Ledger, the Letter, and the Trap. For 2 weeks, Evelina avoided him. Not because she stopped thinking of him, she could not, but because she refused to place herself again where her feelings could be dismissed like an inconvenience. London continued as London always did, indifferent to individual heartbreak. There were balls, there were gossip columns, there were picnics and theatre nights and endless talk of engagements. Mr. Fenwick tried to corner Evelina at a garden party and inform her that he had reconsidered and might allow himself to offer after all. Evelina smiled sweetly and walked away. And then one morning, a letter arrived. It was not from Lord Brackenridge. It was from Lady Meryton. "My dear Lady Evelina," it read in a hurried hand, "I am in distress. My nephew has been drawn into a matter of accounts and accusations. There is talk of the authorities and of smugglers, and of a certain Mr. Ashdown who has whispered poison into the right ears. I do not know whom to trust, but I believe you possess both sense and courage. If you can come today, I should be grateful beyond words." Evelina read the letter twice, her pulse quickening. Her mother, upon hearing, frowned. "Smugglers? Authorities? That is alarming." Her father's expression was grim. "If his estate is vulnerable, men will circle." Evelina said simply, "Then I must go." She arrived at Brackenridge House within the hour. Lady Meryton met her in the hall, pale and trembling with controlled anger. "Thank heavens. He is in the study, and he is being a fool." Evelina's heart clenched. "What has happened?" Lady Meryton pressed her hand to her forehead. "Ashdown claims there are irregularities in the estate accounts. He says my nephew has concealed debts, has mismanaged funds, has, oh, the absurdity, been involved in smuggling along the coast. Smuggling, as if my nephew would—" Evelina's mind sharpened. Why would Ashdown say such things? "Because he is a viper," Lady Meryton snapped. because he has lent money and now wishes to take the estate when it cannot be repaid. Evelina's breath caught. Lent money? Lady Meryton's lips thinned. My nephew went to war. He returned injured. The estate had been neglected. He borrowed to keep tenants fed, roofs repaired. He did not wish to tell anyone, not even me at first. He is proud to a fault. Evelina swallowed. And now Ashdown has produced letters claiming my nephew promised him access to certain coastal warehouses. Lady Meryton's eyes flashed. Forgery, I suspect. But suspicion is enough to ruin a man. Evelina's pulse hammered. Where is Ashdown? In the study, Lady Meryton said bitterly. With 2 magistrates. Evelina did not hesitate. She moved toward the study door. Lady Meryton caught her arm. Evelina, be careful. My nephew will be furious you are here. Evelina's voice was calm. Let him be furious. I would rather endure his anger than his ruin. She opened the study door. The room smelled of ink and old leather. A large desk dominated the space, papers scattered in disarray, unusual disorder for a man like Lord Brackenridge, which told Evelina how shaken he was. Lord Brackenridge stood rigid behind the desk, his face pale with restrained fury. Mr. Ashdown sat opposite, elegant and smug, while 2 magistrates hovered beside him with the stiff caution of men who feared stepping wrong. Lord Brackenridge's gaze snapped to Evelina. His expression tightened in immediate anger. What are you doing here? Evelina curtsied briefly to the magistrates. Gentlemen, forgive the intrusion. I am Lady Evelina Wycliffe, daughter of the Earl of Ainsworth. One magistrate blinked, suddenly more respectful. Lady Evelina. Ashdown's smile widened, too smooth. Ah, the heiress herself. Evelina ignored him. She turned to Lord Brackenridge. Lady Meryton wrote to me. She is distressed. His jaw clenched. You should not have come. Evelina's eyes held his. Then consider me stubborn. The older magistrate cleared his throat. Lady Evelina, we are discussing allegations. Evelina nodded. I understand. May I see the letters? Ashdown's smile sharpened. These are not for a lady's delicate eyes. Evelina's gaze turned cold. My eyes are quite capable. One magistrate hesitated, then held out a packet of papers. Evelina took them carefully. She read. The letters were written in a hand meant to resemble Lord Brackenridge's, rough, masculine strokes. They spoke of arrangements, of payments, of quiet transport through coastal warehouses. Evelina's stomach tightened. It read like guilt. But then she noticed something small, so small most would miss it. A flourish on the B in Brackenridge was wrong. Lord Brackenridge's signature, which Evelina had seen on invitations and charitable lists, curved sharply upward. This one curved down. A man might sign differently when ill or hurried, but the letter repeated the same wrong flourish each time, as though copied. She looked up. My lord, did you write these? Lord Brackenridge's voice was low and dangerous. No. Ashdown spread his hands. Then perhaps someone wrote them on your behalf, someone with access to your seals. Evelina's gaze flicked to the red wax on the letters. And there it was, the detail that made her breath catch. The wax bore a crest, not a hawk, as she had heard in other stories, but a stag, fine branching antlers. She knew that crest. It was not Brackenridge's, it was Ashdown's. Evelina's pulse surged with fierce clarity. She lifted the letter. Gentlemen, she said, voice steady. This wax is not Lord Brackenridge's seal, it is Mr. Ashdown's. Silence struck the room. Ashdown's smile froze. Absurd. One magistrate leaned in, squinting. Is it? Evelina met Ashdown's eyes without blinking. My family has dealt with Mr. Ashdown's firm before. I have seen his seal on receipts. This is the same crest. Lord Brackenridge's face went very still. Ashdown. Ashdown rose smoothly. Lady Evelina is mistaken. She is not, Lord Brackenridge said, voice like ice. And you have made one error you cannot polish away. You used your own seal. Ashdown's eyes narrowed. Even if that were true, it proves nothing. Anyone could have stolen my seal. Evelina's mind raced. Where were these letters kept? In my nephew's desk, Lady Meryton said from the doorway. She had entered silently, unable to stay away. Evelina turned to her. Was the desk ever accessible to visitors? Lady Meryton's lips tightened. Ashdown has been here often. Evelina nodded once. Then she looked at the magistrates. Gentlemen, if you examine the ink and paper, you may find it matches Mr. Ashdown's other correspondence. He is attempting to create the appearance of guilt to seize this estate. The older magistrate exchanged a glance with the younger. We will take these letters for examination. Ashdown's face hardened. You cannot. We can, the magistrate said sharply, and we will. Ashdown's eyes flicked to Evelina with sudden hatred. You interfere at your peril, Lady Evelina. Evelina's voice did not shake. Then I am in peril. How unfortunate. For you. Ashdown left, stiff-backed, escorted by the magistrates. The door closed behind them. Silence fell. Lord Brackenridge remained standing, his hands braced on the desk as though he needed its support. His shoulders rose and fell once, an unguarded sign of strain. Evelina stepped closer. Are you all right? His eyes lifted to hers. The anger was still there, but beneath it, something that looked like cracked restraint. You should not have come, he said again, but his voice was quieter now. Evelina's throat tightened. If you truly wished me gone, you would not keep repeating it. You would simply let me leave. His jaw flexed. I do not want. He stopped, as though the words were dangerous. Evelina's gaze softened. You do not want what? His eyes were dark, weary. You. The word landed like a blow. Evelina did not flinch. That is a lie. His mouth tightened. It is truth. I do not want you entangled in my ruin. Evelina's heart ached. Then do not call it ruin as though it is inevitable. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh, except there was no humour in it. You are too brave. Evelina's voice trembled slightly now. And you are too proud. Something in his face shifted. Pain, frustration, longing. Lady Evelina, he said, voice low, you do not understand what it is to return from war with a broken body and a broken estate and think that you have no right to ask for softness. Evelina stepped closer until she was near enough to see the faint lines of strain around his eyes. Then allow me, she said quietly, to offer it anyway. His gaze held hers for a long moment. So long the room seemed to hush around them. Then he turned away abruptly, as if afraid of his own weakness. You should go before more gossip arrives. Evelina's heart twisted. Gossip is already here, my lord, it always is. He did not look at her. Please. The word was not command this time. It was plea. Evelina swallowed. She nodded once. Very well. But you will not face this alone. Lord Brackenridge's voice was rough. You should not make promises you cannot keep. Evelina's reply was steady. I do not. She left Brackenridge House again, but this time she walked out not in humiliation, but in determination, because she knew now that the danger was real, and that love, if it existed between them, would be tested not by flirtation, but by consequence. Chapter 4. the proud yes and the earned HEA. Within days, the examination of Ashdown's letters began to turn against him, but London did not wait for proof. Rumour moved faster than magistrates, and society's appetite for scandal was relentless. People whispered that Lord Brackenridge had been involved in coastal smuggling, that he had returned from war morally compromised, that he had borrowed money from dangerous sources. The gossip grew teeth. Evelina was invited to fewer gatherings, not because anyone disliked her, but because association with trouble was inconvenient. Lady Ainsworth listened to the whispers, her mouth tightening, and asked Evelina one evening, "Do you wish to withdraw from this?" Evelina answered honestly, "No." Her father watched her for a long moment, then said, "Then we will stand with you." Quietly, but firmly. The Earl of Ainsworth began to ask questions, discreetly, through lawyers and stewards and acquaintances with better sense than malice. Within a week, he discovered what Evelina suspected. Ashdown had been tightening a net around Brackenridge for months, purchasing debts, manipulating accounts, positioning himself as the only saviour, then the only heir, when saviourhood failed. One evening, Evelina received another letter, this one from Lord Brackenridge himself. It was short. "Lady Evelina, you have done enough. The magistrates will summon Ashdown again. He will not forgive interference. Do not come to Brackenridge House. Do not endanger yourself for a man who cannot repay you. Brackenridge." Evelina read it once, then twice. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in her reticule, and went to Brackenridge House anyway. When she arrived, the house was in uproar, footmen moving quickly, Lady Meryton pale but resolute, and Lord Brackenridge in the hall with his coat on, as though he had been about to leave. His gaze landed on Evelina like thunder. What did I write? Evelina removed her gloves slowly. That I should not come. And what did you do? I came. His jaw clenched. Why? Evelina's voice was quiet. Because I have decided something. His eyes narrowed. Decided what? Evelina stepped closer. That I love you. The words were simple. They were not grand. They were perhaps the bravest thing she had ever said. For a moment, Lord Brackenridge did not move. His face went very still, as though he had been struck somewhere tender. Then his voice came, rough and low. Do not say that. Evelina's eyes stung, but she refused to look away. Why? Because you believe it obliges you. Because you believe it is pity. His breath shuddered. Because I cannot afford to believe it. Evelina's voice sharpened with pain. Then you will lose it. He stared at her, and for the first time she saw the fear beneath the pride. You deserve a man who can offer you safety. Evelina's lips trembled. Safety is not always the same as happiness. His hands curled into fists. You are an earl's daughter. And you are a baron, Evelina said, and a soldier, and a man who held a panicked horse's bridle while his own body rebelled. Do not stand there and tell me you are unworthy. His expression wavered. Before he could answer, the front door opened again, and a servant hurried in. My lord, there are men at the gate. Lord Brackenridge turned sharply. Who? The servant swallowed. Mr. Ashdown, and 2 men with him. Evelina's stomach tightened. Here? Lady Meryton stepped forward, her spine straight. He dares! Lord Brackenridge's face hardened. He thinks intimidation will undo proof. Evelina's mind raced. If Ashdown was bold enough to come here now, it meant he was desperate, and desperate men were dangerous in quieter ways, coercion, threats, manipulation of reputation. Lord Brackenridge looked at Evelina. Go upstairs, now. Evelina did not move. No. His voice tightened. Evelina. It was the first time he had said her name without her title. It struck her like a touch. She said softly, I will not hide like a fragile ornament. I will stand. His jaw flexed, then he nodded once, tight, reluctant acceptance. Then stand behind me. Ashdown entered with a smile too sharp to be friendly. Two rough-looking men flanked him, men who did not belong in a noble house. My lord, Ashdown said smoothly. Lady Evelina. How fortunate. Evelina's skin prickled. Fortunate for whom? Ashdown's gaze slid over her like possession. For those who appreciate the value of alliances. Lord Brackenridge's voice was cold. State your purpose. Ashdown sighed as though weary of the charade. You are cornered, Brackenridge. Even if the magistrates find these letters suspicious, your debts remain. Your tenants whisper. Your creditors grow impatient. I have offered you a solution. Lord Brackenridge's eyes narrowed. Extortion is not a solution. Ashdown smiled. Call it what you like. I call it pragmatism. He glanced at Evelina. Ainsworth has influence. Ainsworth has wealth. If Lady Evelina were to encourage her father to settle your debts, it would be remarkably simple to make these rumours vanish. Evelina's blood ran cold. You mean to use me? Ashdown's smile did not waver. I mean to protect you from association with a ruined man. You may even consider it kindness. Lord Brackenridge's voice dropped dangerously. Leave, now. Ashdown's eyes glittered. Or what? Will you duel? You are injured. You cannot even... Lord Brackenridge moved before anyone could blink. He did not lunge. He stepped, quick, controlled, closing the distance enough to make Ashdown flinch. The movement cost him. Evelina saw the strain flash across his face, but he did not show weakness. He said very quietly, If you threaten her again, I will forget every gentlemanly instinct I possess. Ashdown's smile faltered. Evelina stepped forward. Mr. Ashdown, the magistrates are examining your letters. My father is now aware of your dealings. If you remain in this house another moment, I will have you removed. Ashdown's eyes narrowed. You would risk scandal to defend him. Evelina met his gaze. I would risk far more than scandal. Ashdown's expression hardened. Then he gave a thin bow. As you wish. But remember, Lady Evelina, love does not pay debts. He turned, his two men following, and left with an air of forced calm. When the door shut, silence rushed in like a wave. Evelina's heart pounded. She turned to Lord Brackenridge. Are you hurt? He leaned a fraction against the hall table, as though the strain had finally demanded payment. No, he said, but his voice was tight. Evelina reached for his hand without thinking. His glove was warm, his fingers tense. He looked down at her hand on his, then up at her face. Something in him seemed to fracture, not into ruin, but into surrender. Why do you do this? He asked hoarsely. Evelina swallowed. Because I meant what I said. I love you. He closed his eyes briefly, as if the words were both solace and torment. Then he opened them and said, I have wanted you since Hyde Park. Evelina's breath caught. He spoke as though each sentence cost him pride. I have thought of you when I did not wish to think at all. I have tried to push you away because I cannot bear the idea of taking you and then disappointing you, failing you. Evelina's eyes stung. You will not fail me by being human. His gaze held hers, raw now. My estates are encumbered. I am not whole. My name is... Evelina interrupted softly. Your name is yours, and your honour is yours, and your heart, if you will allow it, can be yours too. His jaw flexed. And if you marry me, you will marry into difficulty. Evelina's smile trembled. Then we shall meet difficulty together. That is rather the point of marriage, is it not? For a long moment, he stared at her as though trying to decide whether to trust happiness. Then, at last, he bowed his head, an act that looked strangely like humility. "Evelina," he said, voice quiet and fierce, "if you offer yourself to me freely, knowing all of this, then I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." Evelina's heart swelled until it ached. "Then begin by not rebuffing me again." Something like a laugh escaped him, small, incredulous, and beautiful. "Very well," he murmured. "I will not." The magistrate summoned Ashdown within the fortnight. The wax seal discrepancy proved difficult to explain away, and the handwriting comparisons did him no favours. Worse for him, Lord Ainsworth's discreet inquiries uncovered a trail of purchased debts and manipulated accounts that revealed Ashdown's strategy plainly: to force Brackenridge into desperation, then offer rescue at a price. Ashdown's reputation cracked in the same way he had tried to crack Brackenridge's. It did not end with a dramatic public trial. London rarely rewarded truth with theatre. Instead, it ended with quiet disgrace. Invitations dried up, creditors turned cold, partners withdrew. A man who trafficked in leverage found himself without it. Lord Brackenridge's debts did not vanish overnight. But with Ashdown's hold broken, Brackenridge could renegotiate honestly, with lenders who would accept reasonable terms rather than predatory ones. Lord Ainsworth did not simply pay everything. Evelina would not have allowed it. Instead, he offered a structured loan at fair interest with protections for tenants and repairs, pragmatism, not pity. When Lord Brackenridge came to Ainsworth House to speak with the Earl, he did so with the rigid dignity of a man stepping into judgment. Lord Ainsworth studied him a long moment, then said, "My daughter believes you are worth her heart. Are you?" Lord Brackenridge answered steadily, "I will be." Lord Ainsworth nodded once. "Then treat her love like something sacred. She has guarded it fiercely." "I know," Lord Brackenridge said quietly, "and I am humbled by it." Evelina, listening from the doorway with her mother, felt tears sting her eyes. A week later, in a small morning room filled with spring light, Lord Brackenridge asked Evelina to marry him. There was no grand spectacle, no crowded ballroom, no orchestrated applause. Only Evelina, Lord Brackenridge, Lady Meryton wiping at her eyes, and Lady Ainsworth holding her breath as though she had been waiting 3 seasons for this exhale. Lord Brackenridge's voice was low and careful. "Lady Evelina, Evelina, will you be my wife?" Evelina smiled through tears. "Yes." He closed his eyes briefly, as if the answer settled something deep inside him. Then he lifted her hand, not to perform a dramatic gesture, but to press a restrained, reverent kiss to her knuckles, like a vow spoken through skin. Evelina's heart steadied. This was love, she thought, not loud, not theatrical, but chosen, earned, held. Their wedding took place in early summer, not at some enormous cathedral with half of London invited, but at a country church near Brackenridge's estate, with only family and a few close friends. The villagers gathered outside afterward, shy but hopeful, because they had heard their baron might finally have peace, and peace for a landlord often meant stability for everyone else. Evelina wore ivory silk without excessive ornament. Lord Brackenridge looked slightly pale, still healing, but his gaze on her was steady in a way it had never been before, no longer resisting happiness, but accepting it with both hands. Afterward, as they walked together beneath the churchyard yews, Lady Meryton murmured to Evelina, "He is smiling." Evelina glanced at her husband and saw it, the faint curve at his mouth, no longer unwilling. "Yes," Evelina whispered, "he is." That evening, when the guests had gone and the house had quieted, Evelina found him in the estate office, standing over a ledger, brow furrowed. She stepped behind him and rested her hand lightly on his shoulder. You cannot solve everything in one night. He turned, his expression softening. Old habits. Evelina smiled. Then allow me to teach you new ones. He caught her hand gently and pressed it to his chest. You already have. Outside, the summer air smelled of cut grass and roses. Inside, in a house that had been tired and burdened, there was warmth again. Not the false warmth of chandeliers and gossip, but the quiet warmth of a life beginning in earnest. Evelina thought of her third season, of whispered questions, of expectations like chains. And she realized her mother had been right. Love had arrived quietly. It had simply required courage to recognize it and stubbornness to claim it. Lord Brackenridge brushed his thumb over her knuckles, then said softly, You were wrong about one thing. Evelina tilted her head. Only one? He almost smiled. You said you would not marry at all without love. Evelina's eyes warmed. I did. His gaze held hers, steady now. And yet you would have stood beside me even without marriage. Evelina's throat tightened. She whispered, Yes. He kissed her forehead, gentle, restrained, entirely sincere, and murmured, Then I am grateful I could offer you both. Evelina closed her eyes and let the moment settle. Because this quiet, hard-won tenderness, was exactly what she had waited for. And it was, at last, hers, the end. Thank you, dear reader of the Regency Gazette, for joining us in another tale of love, intrigue, and whispered ballroom secrets. If today's romance delighted you, kindly bestow a like upon this video. It helps our Gazette reach more lovers of Regency storytelling. For weekly journeys into dukes, debutantes, scandals, and slow-burning devotion, please subscribe to the Gazette and tap the little bell so you are notified the moment the next story is published. Until our next edition, may your days be filled with grace and your nights with the promise of romance.